Clara Whitmore always knew her last name carried weight, but not for the reasons you'd think. In the heart of Connecticut, tucked between colonial buildings and sleek modern offices, stood Whitmore Legacy Homes, a fourth-generation home design firm known for its traditional craftsmanship and timeless masculinity. The company had been built on the backs of men, strong, proud men, or so the family history claimed. Clara, the only daughter of Thomas Whitmore, grew up knowing she was outnumbered, outvoiced, and outvoted. But she never imagined she'd be outright dismissed. From a young age, Clara wasn't interested in dolls or fairy tales. She was fascinated by blueprints. While her brothers roughhoused in the backyard, Clara sat beside her grandfather at the drafting table, sketching 2-story farmhouse layouts by the time she was 9. By 12, she could calculate roof loads and estimate the cost of lumber per square foot faster than most foremen. Her mind was sharp, her vision clear. She didn't just see homes, she saw what homes could become: energy-efficient, tech-integrated, sustainable sanctuaries for modern families. But the older she got, the clearer the message became. Being brilliant wasn't enough if you weren't born a son. Despite graduating magna cum laude from MIT with a degree in architectural engineering and completing a double internship at 2 of the top eco-design firms in California, Clara returned home expecting to earn a seat at the table. Not be handed it, just earn it, she wasn't asking for shortcuts. What she got instead was a cold conference room and polite condescension from men who couldn't calculate BTUs from a blueprint if their lives depended on it. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, embodied old-school authority. He believed in tradition, handshakes over emails, and that green energy was a liberal fantasy. He used phrases like, "That's not how we've done things," and "clients like it the way it is." To him, Clara's ideas, smart thermostats, solar roofing, gray water systems, were frivolous, expensive distractions. When she suggested integrating smart home features into future builds, he chuckled, then asked if she was bored and needed a hobby. In boardroom meetings, her brothers cut her off mid-sentence. When she pointed out rising costs of outdated HVAC systems and the growing demand for sustainable design, they rolled their eyes. "We build homes, Clara," her eldest brother scoffed one day, "not sci-fi bunkers." The real slap in the face came during the annual Strategy Summit, a 3-day event where the family mapped out their 5-year vision. Clara had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive presentation, market research, cost-benefit analysis, visual mock-ups of net-zero homes, a full rollout plan. She poured her soul into that pitch, but when her turn came, her father let her speak for 5 minutes before interrupting. "We're not going to change our entire business model for a fad," he said, flipping the binder shut. "It's cute, honey, but let the men handle the real strategy." Cute. That one word sank like concrete in her gut. Clara sat there, frozen. Not because she was surprised, she wasn't, but because, in that moment, something inside her quietly snapped. For years, she had bent over backward, trying to prove she belonged. She worked longer hours, held back her opinions to keep the peace, accepted being sidelined with grace. But this was more than dismissal. This was erasure. She smiled politely, excused herself, and left the room. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in them, they would never change, but in her. She realized she was done begging for validation from men who refused to see her. The irony was, she had studied architecture to build things. But now, she would build something else entirely, her own empire, brick by brick, without the Whitmore name stapled on the front. She wouldn't need their money, their clients, or their approval. All she needed was a clean slate, and she'd already drawn the blueprint in her mind. And so, beneath the polished oak beams of her father's office, under the eyes of ancestors whose portraits hung on the wall, Clara made a silent vow. They will never see me coming, but when they do, they'll wish they had. Clara didn't storm out that day. She walked out with dignity, but inside she was burning. For months after that boardroom dismissal, she continued to show up, clock in, and smile through the sting of condescension. She wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not without a plan. She knew how the game was played. If she quit, they'd call her emotional. If she argued, they'd call her difficult. So she waited. She watched, and she listened. While her brothers flaunted their weekend golf trips with suppliers and took 2-hour strategy lunches, Clara got busy. Quietly, she started collecting data. She ran internal reports on profit margins, client retention, and cost overruns. She spotted where the company was bleeding money. In outdated HVAC partnerships, inflated material costs, and inefficient workflows that no one had updated since the Clinton administration. Then came the software. Whitmore Legacy Homes was still operating like it was 1997. Paper contracts, handwritten invoices, blueprints that were photocopied instead of digitized. So Clara brought in a cloud-based project management system. At first, she positioned it as a trial. Her team saw immediate gains, faster timelines, clearer communication, and a 12% cut in average overhead per build. But when she tried to present those results to the executive board, her father brushed it off. "Technology doesn't build homes. Men do," he said, leaning back in his leather chair like it was 1953. Still, Clara persisted. She knew the winds were changing. Clients, especially the younger, dual-income families, moving up from New York City, were asking about energy efficiency, smart systems, and sustainable design. They weren't looking for another colonial-style home with oak paneling and brass fixtures. They wanted induction ranges, solar panels, reclaimed wood, and filtered gray water systems. Clara had her finger on the pulse. Her family, meanwhile, was stuck in a nostalgic fog. The final blow came on a humid Tuesday in late June. Clara had just landed a potential partnership with EcoVantage Systems, a green tech firm based in Vermont. It was a big deal, the kind of contract that could redefine the company's portfolio. She pitched it to the board with every ounce of polish she had. The numbers, the market trends, even a pilot project already lined up with a client in Fairfield County. Her father listened. Then, without so much as a pause, he turned to her older brother, Gregory, and said, "Let's assign this one to you." Clara blinked. "I've been building this relationship for 3 months," she said. "I'm leading the design. The client requested me specifically." Gregory shrugged. "You're great with the details, Clara, but this is a strategic deal. It's better if one of the guys takes it." One of the guys. That night, Clara didn't go home. She drove, just drove, down I-95, windows down, hair whipping in the wind. Somewhere past New Haven, she pulled into a 24-hour diner, the kind with cracked booths and bottomless coffee, and stared at her reflection in the window. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she just realized it was over. They would never let her lead, not because she wasn't capable, but because every win she earned made them feel smaller. Her competence wasn't seen as strength, it was a threat. And that's when the real betrayal unfolded. 3 days later, her access to the project database was revoked. IT claimed it was a system update. Her assistant was reassigned without notice. And then came the board memo. Thomas Whitmore had officially named Gregory as Vice President of Innovation, a title Clara herself had proposed 6 months earlier for herself. That was the knife. She wasn't just being ignored anymore, she was being pushed out. The Friday before 4th of July weekend, Clara was called into her father's office. The air smelled like cigar smoke and varnish, the room lined with hunting trophies and oil paintings of grim-faced Whitmore men. Her father didn't ask her to sit. He didn't offer her coffee. He simply said, "Clara, it's clear you're not happy here. Maybe it's time you explored other opportunities." She stared at him. "You're firing me." He shifted. "Not firing, just freeing you up." The words hit like a slap. Freeing you up, like she was an appointment on a calendar, a temporary inconvenience. Clara nodded. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She simply stood, walked out of the office, and didn't look back. She didn't even go to her desk. Everything she needed, her designs, her plans, her vision, was already backed up on a drive she carried in her purse. That was the moment she knew. If they wouldn't give her a seat at the table, she'd build her own. They thought they'd clipped her wings. But all they'd really done was open the cage door. What Thomas and her brothers didn't realize was that Clara Whitmore had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She had the knowledge, the grit, and most importantly, the why. She wasn't doing this for revenge. She was doing this to build the future they were too stubborn to see. And someday soon, they'd realize their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating her. It was pushing her out just before she was about to change everything. Clara didn't disappear. She evolved. In the weeks following her departure from Whitmore Legacy Homes, the silence from her family was louder than any words. Not a phone call, not a message, not even a half-hearted "good luck." But she didn't need their blessing. What she needed was space. Space to breathe, to think, and to build. She took her savings, just under $200,000 she'd set aside over the years, and rented a modest 1,200 square foot studio in a revitalized part of Stamford, Connecticut. It wasn't much, just exposed brick walls and rattling pipes, but it was hers. And, more importantly, it was a start. She called it Aller Designs, a subtle nod to her mother's maiden name, the only woman in her family tree who'd ever run her own business. Her mother had passed when Clara was 16, but the lessons lived on. If you can't find a door, build one yourself. Clara didn't launch with fanfare. No press release, no open house. Just a website, a vision, and a phone. She reached out to the few clients she'd worked with personally, the ones who had appreciated her innovative touch, her meticulous planning, and her honest communication. One of those clients was the Fairfield couple from the EcoVantage pilot project. They didn't hesitate. "If you're starting something of your own," they told her, "we want in." That first job, a 3,000 square foot eco-smart home with geothermal heating and a fully integrated solar system, changed everything. Not only did it earn her praise in a regional architecture magazine, but it also attracted the attention of a young, hungry team of engineers and designers who were tired of being overlooked in the traditional firms. Clara built a team of outliers, people like her, a 29-year-old structural engineer from Brooklyn who'd left a major firm after being passed over for promotion, a project manager, mom of two, who was juggling her kids' soccer schedules and spreadsheets without missing a beat, a carpenter who had spent 15 years in construction before finally being given a shot at design. Together, they weren't just building homes, they were building a movement. Aller Designs focused on eco-luxury, high-performance homes that married sustainability with style. No more cookie-cutter layouts. No more fake wood floors and hollow cabinets. Clara's homes had soul. Reclaimed barnwood, low-flow plumbing, open-concept kitchens with quartz countertops, and hidden tech hubs that allowed homeowners to control lighting, security, and temperature with a single app. But more than the aesthetics, clients were drawn to Clara's mission. She wasn't just selling homes. She was selling independence from outdated norms, from toxic workplaces, and from the belief that legacy had to look like a last name carved into an office door. Word spread fast. By year 2, Aller Designs had grown from a one-room office to a 6,500 square foot space near the harbor, complete with open workstations, a materials library, and a childcare room with a chalkboard wall and juice boxes in the fridge. Revenue topped $5.8 million, and Whitmore Legacy Homes, they didn't even notice. Too busy chasing contracts that were slipping through their fingers. What Clara had started to do, quietly, methodically, was outcompete them from the inside out. She knew their suppliers. She knew their pricing models, their build timelines, even the common complaints from their subcontractors. She offered faster builds, better pay, and, most importantly, respect. Within 18 months, 3 of their top contractors had signed on with Aller. Clients began switching too, especially the younger professionals who wanted homes that reflected their values. But Clara didn't gloat. She didn't show up to industry mixers in designer suits or buy full-page ads in trade magazines. She let her work speak for itself. And slowly, Whitmore Legacy Homes began to feel the chill. First, it was a few lost bids, then a lawsuit from a dissatisfied client over delayed timelines. Then came the press, a glowing feature on Aller Designs in Architectural Digest, right next to a footnote about Whitmore losing another VP. And yet, Thomas Whitmore still hadn't called. The brothers, though, they were sweating. Gregory showed up unannounced at Clara's office one afternoon, wearing a forced smile and holding a coffee she didn't ask for. "Clara," he said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot." She didn't even offer him a seat. "What do you want, Gregory?" He hesitated. "Maybe we could collaborate. You've got something special here." She let the silence hang, then said, "You mean now that I've built something you can't ignore?" Gregory cleared his throat. "We're family." "No," Clara said. "Family doesn't clip your wings and call it mercy." That was the last time she saw him. By year 3, Whitmore Legacy Homes was floundering. Construction delays, poor reviews, and a dwindling client list had turned what was once a regional powerhouse into a shell of its former self. Meanwhile, Aller Designs expanded into Massachusetts and Rhode Island, taking on luxury commercial projects and community eco-parks. Clara's firm was no longer the underdog, and yet she still kept her mother's photo in her desk drawer, her quiet reminder of why she started. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation, reclaiming her voice, her power, her future. One beam, one blueprint, one brave decision at a time. 3 years after walking out of Whitmore Legacy Homes, Clara sat in her corner office, looking out over the Long Island Sound. Her floor-to-ceiling windows framed a soft, golden sunset that spilled across her desk. A desk made from reclaimed red oak, built by a local artisan she'd partnered with on her first project. Her world was quiet now, not the silence of being ignored or dismissed, but the peace that comes from no longer needing anyone's permission. And then the call came. It was a Thursday morning around 9:15 a.m. Her assistant knocked gently on the door, eyes uncertain. "Clara," she said, "you have a walk-in. He says he's your father." Clara didn't speak at first. The name didn't need repeating. She hadn't seen Thomas Whitmore in nearly 4 years, not since the boardroom ambush where he handed her dreams to her brothers like a consolation prize. She'd made peace with that moment. Or at least she thought she had. She looked down at her calendar. Client pitch at 10, design team check-in at noon. There wasn't time for emotional debris today, but maybe that was the point. Maybe it was time to close the loop. "Send him in," she said, her voice steady. He looked smaller than she remembered. Thomas Whitmore had always been a looming figure, standing 6 feet tall with a voice that could silence a room. But now he walked with a cane, and the lines on his face weren't just age, they were consequences. "Clara," he said, removing his cap, "you look well." I am, she replied. You're here for a reason? He sat down slowly, not waiting for an invitation. I heard about the Boston project, that eco tower downtown. You beat out Whitmore Legacy Homes. Again. Clara folded her hands. I didn't beat you. You lost it on your own. Thomas looked down. Fair enough. There was a long pause, a thick, heavy stillness that wrapped around the office like fog. I came to apologize, he finally said. I should have seen it sooner. What you built, what you've become, it's extraordinary, and I'm proud of you. It was the first time in Clara's 38 years that her father had said those words, and they didn't land the way she thought they would. They didn't crack open a dam or pull tears from her eyes. They didn't do much of anything at all, because she no longer needed them. I didn't do this for your pride, Clara said. I did it because I couldn't live in the shadow of men who thought I was disposable. He nodded, eyes wet. I know. I was wrong. About you, about all of it. I thought I was preserving a legacy, but I was destroying it. Clara tilted her head. Why now? His breath caught. Because I don't want to die with this on my heart. That hit differently. He wasn't just there to apologize. He was there because time had started counting backward. His cane, his tremor, the way he winced when he shifted in the seat. Something was wrong. Is it cancer? She asked softly. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said quickly. I'm not looking for help or money or redemption. I just needed to say it, to tell you that you were right, and I was blind. Clara took a breath, in and out, just like her therapist had taught her. Do you want a glass of water? She asked. He nodded. That would be nice. She poured it herself, cold from the office mini-fridge, the good filtered kind she liked. When she handed it to him, their hands touched briefly. The warmth in his was unfamiliar now, softer, slower. I don't know if we can rebuild anything, she said honestly. There's too much distance, too much hurt. I understand, he said, sipping, but maybe peace is enough. She sat back down and looked him in the eye. Peace. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a clean slate. But it was something. They talked for 15 minutes more. He asked about her last project, the one with the green roof and native gardens. She told him about her head designer's new baby. They even shared a quiet laugh about the early days, the time she'd drawn an entire house plan on a napkin during a lunch break. When he stood to leave, he didn't ask for another meeting. He didn't say, see you soon. He simply said, thank you for seeing me. She walked him to the elevator. The ride down would take him 32 floors. Long enough, perhaps, for reflection. When the doors closed, Clara didn't cry. She didn't rage. She didn't feel triumph or grief or vindication. She just felt still. And that was the victory. She turned back to her office. The sun had climbed higher now, bathing the room in light. On her desk was a framed photo of her first completed home, the one that changed it all. She smiled. Peace didn't look like revenge. It didn't look like domination or downfall. Peace looked like owning her mornings, like working with people who respected her, like building homes that made lives better. Peace looked like freedom. And Clara Whitmore, no longer her father's daughter, no longer a cast-off, no longer a shadow, had finally built it for herself. It started with one home, then a neighborhood, then a movement. Allard Designs, the company Clara Whitmore built from dust and defiance, had become something larger than she'd ever dreamed. What began as a quiet rebellion against the traditions that tried to silence her now stood as a symbol of what could be achieved when you build with heart, vision, and the guts to walk away from those who never saw your worth. By the 5th anniversary of Allard Designs, Clara stood on stage at a green building conference in Austin, Texas. The room was packed. Architects, environmental engineers, interior designers, students from schools across the U.S., even a few former competitors who had once scoffed at the idea of luxury homes that were sustainable, tech-savvy, and accessible. She adjusted the mic and smiled. "When I started this company," she began, "people told me the market wasn't ready for what I was offering. Smart homes, built from recycled steel, with solar panels, composting systems, and native landscaping. They said, 'You're dreaming too big, Clara.' Americans want tradition. They want granite countertops and two-car garages, not reclaimed wood and rooftop gardens." The audience chuckled. They knew where this was going. But what I saw wasn't a fantasy. It was a future. And not just for the planet, but for people like me who were tired of being underestimated. She paused, letting the silence work for her. "I named this company Aller, an old family name on my mother's side, because I wanted to create something that honored the women who were never allowed to build. And I wanted to prove that legacy doesn't have to be inherited. Sometimes you forge it." The crowd rose to their feet. That was the power of Clara Whitmore now. Not as the ousted daughter of a crumbling dynasty, but as the architect of her own empire, one built not on ego or entitlement, but purpose and people. Back in her New York headquarters, her team had grown from 3 scrappy staffers in a shared co-working space to over 180 full-time employees across 3 states. Aller now had offices in Brooklyn, Denver, and Santa Clara, each one powered entirely by renewable energy, stocked with ergonomic furniture, meditation rooms, and on-site daycare. She believed happy, balanced people built better homes, and the results spoke for themselves. Their 2,800 square foot smart home prototype in Boulder sold for $1.2 million and came with 0 utility bills thanks to advanced solar capture and AI-controlled energy distribution. A 1,600 square foot modular design in Charlotte, North Carolina became a blueprint for eco-friendly housing across the Southeast. Even big box developers had started mimicking Aller's open floor plans and natural ventilation systems. But more than numbers or press coverage, it was the people who told Clara her work mattered that kept her grounded. There was Haley Monroe, a former stay-at-home mom from Toledo, Ohio, who'd watched Clara's TED Talk and went back to school for sustainable design. Now she led Aller's Midwest division, or James Carter, a retired Navy vet from Florida who used his VA loan to buy one of Aller's first single-story solar cottages. He said it was the first place that ever felt like home. And then there were the young women. They wrote to her every day, emails, letters, Instagram DMs. Some were students studying architecture. Some were stuck in dead-end family businesses. Some were women who'd never touched a blueprint in their life, but felt somehow that Clara had built something for them too. "You showed me that it's not too late to start over at 45. My dad never believed in me, but I see myself in you. Thank you for being the voice I didn't know I needed." Clara kept those messages in a binder on her desk, alongside old renderings and a worn photo of her mother, the woman who taught her how to hold a hammer and stand her ground. It hadn't been easy. There were still moments of doubt, nights when she stared at the ceiling wondering if she could keep up with the growth, days when former colleagues tried to discredit her, claiming her success was a fluke, or worse, just good PR. But then she'd walk through one of her completed homes, feel the cool air from passive cross-ventilation, see the recycled glass countertops shimmer in the sun, hear the birdsong from a native-planted garden, and she'd remember why she started. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving her father wrong. It was about building right. And she wasn't alone. Thanks to her advocacy, several architecture programs had introduced new curriculums focused on women in design leadership. She funded scholarships for first-generation college students pursuing green construction. She sat on boards, lobbied for energy-efficient housing credits, and consulted with local governments about urban revitalization projects. Her work had sparked something, not a trend, but a transformation. And people noticed. When she received the National Design Award for Sustainability, Clara wore a navy blue suit and minimal jewelry. No spectacle, no red carpet. Just a quiet nod to the hundreds of people who'd helped her get there. She ended her acceptance speech with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt: "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And mine, she said, wasn't just to build homes, it was to build hope. The applause didn't fade for a full 2 minutes. By the end of that year, Clara was named one of Time magazine's most influential women in business. Whitmore Legacy Homes, meanwhile, had filed for bankruptcy and sold off most of its assets to stay afloat. Her brothers had taken jobs elsewhere. Her father had retired quietly. Clara never gloated. She never spoke ill of them in public. She didn't need to. Her legacy wasn't built on their ashes. It was built one brick, one beam, one empowered life at a time. And the future? It looked a lot like her. Life teaches us that sometimes the door to our future isn't opened by others. It's built by our own hands. Clara Whitmore's journey is a testament to the quiet power of perseverance, self-respect, and vision. She reminds us that validation from those who underestimate us is not a requirement for success. Instead of chasing approval, Clara chose to build something greater, a life rooted in purpose, not permission. Her story encourages us, especially in midlife, that it's never too late to evolve, to walk away from toxic traditions, and to start fresh with dignity. We are not defined by the opportunities we're denied, but by the ones we create for ourselves. Whether rebuilding a career, pursuing a long-postponed dream, or redefining family on our own terms, Clara's example shows that true peace doesn't come from proving others wrong. It comes from building a life that feels right. In a world that often tries to silence or sideline, the real victory is in standing tall, moving forward, and forging a legacy that reflects who we are, not who others expected us to be.